Hello, my name is Radu, and I'm part of VMware and the VCF division of Broadcom in more than 14 years. And most of this time, I'm working in teams which are responsible to build graphical user interface like the vSphere client, the SX client, and the VMware Cloud Foundation UI. And since the beginning of this year, I have the chance to manage the team behind the PowerCLI. So definitely a lot of new things to me. Very interesting, to be honest, quite challenging, and I am really getting passionate about it, especially the topic that I'm going to talk about now. On the other side, I figure out that the type of the problems and the approaches to address these problems are quite similar between the graphical user interface and the command line interface. So not everything is new to me, and I can use my experience based on the building graphical user interface. And also, I'm managing a small group of engineers who are responsible to provide the infrastructure for developing and testing the products that I just mentioned. So the automation of the infrastructure management is an essential part of their daily work. And this allows me to have the point of view from the customer perspective using automation. And I was really fascinated actually to understand and to realize that most of the commandlets that we have in PowerCLI are actually built on top or based or inspired by the workflows that we have in the vSphere client, for example. This doesn't sound natural to me, but obviously this is a quite successful approach, at least based on the numbers of downloads and the usage and the feedback that we have from US customers. But still, we have to admit that these commandlets, there are always some corner cases or specific use cases that are new features that are not yet covered by these so-called high-level commandlets. And in order to address this, we introduced the so-called auto-generated modules that provides a PowerCLI interface to the public APIs. So basically, everything that we have as a public API can be invoked by the PowerCLI. But and here you can see on the screen how they look like. Obviously, there is a lot of place for improvement, and how to say? Well, obviously, what you can see here is that they're not straightforward. They are actually quite hard to use. So, for example, here we have some help that create config and then create example. Definitely not natural to be used. Also, this doesn't look like exactly PowerShell script, right? And additionally, we lack documentation for most of the pieces, and we don't have auto completion everywhere. Here we have another example for creating a user. Once again, not natural for PowerShell user, but obviously it also is quite different from what we saw in the previous slide. So we also lack consistency. And in order to improve this, in the last releases, we created a second generation of this auto-generated modules, which we call the PowerCLI SDK modules. With them, we have much better access to our APIs. We have much more, we have better commandlets because we have improved the APIs. We work together with the API team in order to get this, and we now cover more products. So here you can see how the same operation for creating an account looks like with this second generation of this low-level commandlets. We have initially this initialize commandlets, which task is so we have here this pattern of initializers, which creates a configurations. So basically all the low-level commandlets that start with initialize are doing the configuration. And then we have this invoke create local account commandlet that uses this configuration to do the actual API call and create the respective object. But instead of talking and showing some slides, let me do a real demo that will give you better understanding how to use this low-level commandlets. So for the demo, I'm going to use the VMware Code Foundation, because unfortunately, until now, we still don't have high-level commandlets, and we rely only on these auto-generated commandlets in order to be able to automate the VMware Cloud Foundation through the PowerCLI. So the first thing is obvious to make a connection. It looks like this. We just invoke this connect VCF SDC managed server, provide the IP of the server with the user and the password. And here the PowerCLI do the magic and keeps this connection connected, refresh, and you don't have to take care for this connection, just like all the other modules that we have. The next thing is to do some operation that we want in this SDC manager. Let's get, for example, and to do that, let's get an example operation on one of the common objects that we have in the VCF inventory. And for example, the domains. Let's get the list of the domains. In order to do that, the next point is to figure out what is the API that we have to use. Obviously, we don't have PowerCLI documentation for the low-level commandlets because they're based on the APIs, right? So you have to go to the documentation of the Broadcom developer portal, click on the APIs, and find out the API documentation for your product. So here we're using the VMware Cloud Foundation, and it is in this hyper-converged infrastructure section in the VMware Cloud Foundation API. So here you can see all the details for the API that we provide for the VCF. And let's get to the section for the domains. So as I said, let's get the list of the domains. Clicking here and start reading the documentation. Obviously, we have no prerequisites. We just have to invoke the API as a step. Here, what is my recommendation is to look at this HTTP request section. It shows two things, that you have to do the get method, to invoke the get method with this path. And this is very important because these two things we are going to use in order to find our commandlet, low-level commandlet. So in order to do that, we introduced a so-called operation commandlet that will allow me to filter all the available auto-generated commandlets by these parameters, path and method. And we have such operation commandlet for each of the auto-generated commandlets, or for each of the PowerCLI SDKs. And you can find them because they're following this pattern. They start with get dash and end up with operation. So you can see that we have get NSX operation for the auto-generated commandlets for the NSX, for the SRM, and this is the one that we need to use. It is get VCF SDC manager operation. Okay, and here we can filter this by path, which was v1 domain. I can demonstrate you that we have autocomplete. And once we filter them, it finds two low-level commandlets that match this pattern with path v1 domains. Okay, and obviously the first one is for creating the domain, the second one is for getting the domains. We need this one, but let me demonstrate how to filter even more. If you filter by method, in the first case we have post. In our case, as you see from the documentation, we need get. Okay, and we get just one low-level commandlet, which is the one that we're looking for. So let me show you how to use this. Here we have full documentation, and you don't need to get all this prompt. So we can use get help. And let's get the full documentation. So here we have the name of the commandlet, synopsis, syntax, how to call this, the parameters, their type, if they are required, and all the needed details. And also something that's very useful to me, this is the example section, which you can also access by just calling the examples that most of the time I use. So we have to call this invoke get-vcf domains, and this will return me the domains. So we can check here from the documentation what is the response of this API. It is returning elements, which is an array of domain objects with all the properties that they have. So let's get the domains. Okay, calling it, and we have the domains here. So let's check what it looks like. We have a list of domains. Here we have one domain. Let's check it. Okay, so in this domain, we have a domain with name, new demo name, with ID, and all other properties that are available for the domain. Let's get to the more complex operation. Let's get a specific domain, for example. Here is a prerequisite. We obviously need to have a domain and its ID. And we have to invoke the API using this ID. Okay, now once again, looking at the get HTTP request, we have to invoke get method with this path, which includes not only the v1 domain, but some identifier. Okay, once again, we get to our best friend, which is get VCF SDC manager operation in order to filter and to find our low-level commandlet domains. And here we have how to complete, and it provides the different options. Okay, so it gives you directly the domain ID with curly brackets. And when you filter it, we find out that we have 3 commandlets that are using this path. Obviously, this is not the one that we are looking for. Probably this is the one. Yeah, because the final one is update. Once again, we can filter it by the method get in this case, and we get our invoke VCF get domain commandlet. So once again, get help. Let's use examples. And it says, sorry, not get domains. I copied the wrong one. Get domain. We have to invoke it by providing the ID. Okay, so in this case, we can get the, or actually, if you want to make it like a real thing, I can do like this. Elements. Okay, this is the ID. And now I can do invoke VCF get domain with ID. Okay, so let's see what we get here. We get our domain with name, new demo name. Okay, what about more complex tasks like mutation operation? So here we have some rename a domain API. So what it does, it as a prerequisite, it requires a domain. Okay, we need to get the ID of the domain. We already have it. Then we have to create a domain update spec with a name field. Okay, and then we have to invoke the validate update domain spec to ensure the requested new name is valid. Okay, obviously here in the VCF we have this pattern that first we have to invoke the validation method that says, well, your JSON is correct, and once it returns that succeeded, then you have to call the actual update operation. Here is it. Okay, so let's start with the validation API call. It requires to do a post to this path, which includes ID and validation. Okay, so we have once again to find our commandlet, and we get back to our best friend, get VCF SDC manager operation v1 domains domain ID, and we have validation, right? And I think we don't need the filter. Let's try it without method. Oops, something went wrong. Okay, I just added another symbol here. Okay, so the command is invoke VCF validate domain spec. So let's get the help for it to see how to use it, or direct the examples. Okay, so obviously here we have a full example with all the settings that we can provide, but let's use the straightforward one. We have to create basically this. We have to use the initialize VCF domain update spec to create spec and to pass it to our validate domain update commandlet with the ID. Okay, so let's see what we have to do in order to create this spec. Okay. Once again, we have a lot of information here. Okay, but what I'm looking for is that actually I can provide here a name. Okay, so we have to have the spec, which is created by calling the initialize VCF domain update spec with setting the name. Let's call it rename name demo. Okay. So we have the spec. Let's check how it looks like. Oh, it has a new name. Okay, and now we have to invoke the actual operation, right? Which is invoke VCF validate domain update spec with the ID and the spec that we just created. So we see that it's completed validation of this domain update spec. It is succeeded, so we can continue with the next step, which is the actual update. So we have to invoke now the patch method for path, which is v1 domains with some ID. Once again, if you don't know what is the command, we can use the get VCF SDC manager with. Okay, so we see the 3 commandlets, and this is the one obviously that we have to use. And if you get the examples, I believe that we already guess what we have to do to invoke the VCF update domain with ID and with the ID of the domain and the spec. Okay, let's call it ID and it's called and the domain update spec. Oh, this is why I didn't get the autocomplete. Now I think it is called invoke VCF update domain. Okay, and here I can demonstrate you the auto completion. It provides me all the options, and here is the first option. And I provide the spec. Okay. Well, the operation completed successfully, and now what we can do is we can get all the list of the, for example, of the, or we can just list get the domain once again to check that its name is updated. So it was VCF get domain with ID, yeah, with the same ID. This should work. And yeah, our name is changed. So I just demonstrate you how to use the API by mapping the commandlet, and actually all the abilities that we have in the API, you can call them through the PowerCLI interface. Okay. So to recap, how to use the PowerCLI modules, I just showed you that you have to start with the Broadcom developer portal with looking at the API documentation. This is a step that you cannot skip, unfortunately. You have to know what operations you have to do for your product. The second thing is that I demonstrate you the invoke and initialize patterns that we follow, and the get operation commandlet, which is your best friend in finding the commandlet to use. And additionally, also the examples, the documentation, and autocomplete that is available for all the auto-generated commandlets. And something that I have to admit, unfortunately, we didn't manage for the last release to introduce the get operation for the VC module. And there are two options how to fix this. One is to download this module from the examples GitHub that we provide. Or another option is that we have updated our documentation. So for example, if you get to the APIs for the VC and scroll down, you can find the examples. So basically what you can understand from here is that for this API, you have to use this respective, in this case, I think it's create category, the respective O-level commandlet is available here. So you have to get out of the commandlet from the prompt in order to get this information, or to install this module that is available as an example. And finally, I want to mention you to share you what is the current state with the commandlets that we have. And to reassure you once again, we still continue to invest in the high-level commandlets, but until we get the proper coverage, your option is to use this PowerCLI SDK or auto-generated low-level commandlets. Okay, another thing that I want to mention before ending this session is the channels that you can use to stay connected, the PowerCLI Ideas AHA portal, and also the contacts for our PM, Angel Petrov, and me, Radoslav Kovatchev. Thank you.